straight from his mouth into MAGA veins, as evidenced by the signs I saw with my very own little eyes, parroting his claims outside the courthouse today. Joining me now is Tim O'Brien, senior executive editor of Bloomberg Opinion and MSNBC political analyst. Always good to see you, Tim. But one of the things that I did notice between the first time I went and this time is that there were actually people there. The first time there were no Trump supporters. There were no protesters. It wasn't a lot, but it seemed very coordinated because he tweeted some specific language. That language was on a sign.
They still haven't learned how to pronounce Justice Merchan's name. However, they were out there yelling, going, Merchant. Merchant Marine.
How much do you think, I mean, having dealt with him and covered him for so long, how fearful do you think he is tonight?
I think everything he's doing, indicates panic. You know, he's got nonsensical, capitalized truths. I guess I hate calling them truths, but, posts to his truth account.
Yeah.
And I think he feels cornered. I think he has for some time. Yeah. And as the trial wears along and the evidence creeps up, I think it puts him in a real corner. And I think he feels that, I think perhaps he's been sleeping during some portions of court.
Times when he leans back and his eyes are closed.
He closes his eyes.
Yeah.
And I actually think he's in this fugue state. And he's trying to pretend that what he's confronting in that courtroom doesn't exist. Yeah. The same way a small child, if you tell a small child they've done something wrong and they stick their fingers in their ears and they say, no, that didn't happen. I think that's where he's at.
Fugue state.
Hearing from Team Trump.
Well, actually, one of the things Donald Trump said that was so interesting to me is something that I've heard time and time again from the defense, something that they believe is going to help them in the case, and it is the fact that the prosecution didn't call a number of witnesses that could have corroborated the story from Michael Cohen, that being, in particular, Allen Weisselberg and Keith Schiller. There were several conversations that Michael Cohen relayed between him and Allen Weisselberg. They did not call Allen Weisselberg to confirm that conversation, as well as that specific call that we know that the defense tried to say was about a prank caller, whereas the prosecution had said it was about a Stormy Daniels, something that Michael Cohen himself had said. They could have called Keith Schiller. That call went to Keith Schiller. And this is something the defense thinks will help them in the end. There could be speculation among the jury as to why exactly they didn't call those witnesses. Now, I will say, while we don't know exactly why they didn't call them, both are considered Trump loyalists. Allen Weisselberg, currently sitting in Rikers, was likely not to be a cooperative witness with the prosecution. Keith Schiller, and no one has heard from for a long time, but he ended on good terms with Trump and is still considered a close Trump confidant. So things to keep in mind here. Clearly, Trump regurgitating the information he's hearing from his defense team. One other thing I want to note, Donald Trump sounded very tired. This is a long day for a man who is almost 78 years old, sitting in the courtroom through all of these procedures, not really doing anything, waiting to hear if there's going to be a verdict. I am told by his team that they are hoping that this lengthier period of time, that it wasn't a quick conviction or a quick verdict, means something optimistic for the former president. Jake?
That's right. His birthday's coming up, June 14th. It's very sweet of you to remember that, Kristen Holmes. Appreciate it. Thanks so much. Let's bring back our panel.
For the prosecution, because they're now going to hear it back and know that Hope Hicks and Trump's personal secretary and yes, Cohen, whatever you think of him, a lot of other people added to Pecker's testimony. I never heard, and again, I try to cover this as fairly as I can, I never heard anyone really undercut his core points. And here's what he said about his consciousness of all this. Even while he was doing it, the defense is saying, oh, it happens all the time. Pecker, whose direct testimony says, he told his own Inquirer leadership, and by the way, these aren't, snowflakes, okay? They've been through things. He told them, we're going to try to help the campaign, and I want to keep this as quiet as possible. I want it very confidential. Is that bad?
Yeah, it is bad because, again, it really paints a picture of the nature of this conspiracy. And I think that, you hit the nail on the head a moment ago. Pecker's testimony really wasn't challenged in any credible, his credibility wasn't really challenged in a meaningful way. And so they're getting Pecker's story, and then they're going to see how Cohen's story fits into that. And I think the portions that you read, his story does fit into that. And that's exactly what the prosecutors wanted. They wanted to paint this picture, and they wanted it corroborated. They want all the pieces to fit together. And that's what the jury appears to be doing, is taking a piece that is kind of a given, Pecker, and taking, Cohen and saying, does this really fit in there? And it does. That's a problem for the defense.
Yeah. And
in the different parties. Here, he can just read the testimony, but he won't say do you actually mean this? If it's confusing, they'll just decide, okay, we won't ask that question.
But David Pecker did get into, in his testimony, some of the reasons why he didn't fund it, and they're going to hear that. I mean, he got legal advice. And he
Stormy. Why he didn't fund Stormy.
Stormy. And,
But, I mean, you're saying that the question implies a misunderstanding of the McDougal funding because...
But the McDougal funding, he do fund it, but then they decided not to take the money back.
Right. Lachlan, we'll give you the last word. What is your sort of spidey sense picking up that these are the things that the jury is first interested in hearing more about?
My initial spidey sense is it's not a good indicator for Donald Trump. They're not looking for further information about the paper because I think that's pretty locked down. But they are going back to that meeting in August of 2015, which establishes the conspiracy, and looking at David Pecker's testimony in particular, and compared to Michael Cohen, Pecker on the stand was quite credible and had all the industrial knowledge of what had gone on. So, I think that it's really interesting that they would look at David Pecker over Michael Cohen, but I think that the Pecker testimony really is the tick-tock of firstly how the conspiracy is formed and then how it's carried out over several months in the lead up to the election and then following the election when he then goes and meets again with Donald Trump.
Yeah, and I mean, just importantly, there's no remorse ever articulated. And Donald Trump, after Pecker's direct, and I don't even remember if there was a cross of David Pecker. If there was, it wasn't particularly.
He says he's a friend and mentor.
Yeah. Right. I mean, Trump was out talking. Ostensibly, the jury wouldn't have seen this, but Trump went out and said he was very strong for me. A housekeeping note for us: I am not reading from an actual transcript. These are from our journalists' notes inside the courtroom, the contemporaneous notes that we all get. Those of us relying on reporters as our eyes and ears. Lachlan Cartwright is indispensable in our ability to understand this part of the story. Thank you very much for jumping in front of a camera and joining us. We're going to sneak in another break. We'll all be right back on the other side.
The 55 pages of the instructions from the judge, it's all written down. But Judge Grasso, explain to me, because I'm still a little bit confused about this. If I have a copy of all these instructions from the judge, why don't members of the jury have these same written 55 pages that they can simply read?
The theory is they don't want individual jurors acting like the judge. They don't want, one juror reading instructions with another juror's interpret and another juror. This system is designed to funnel all of that instructions, testimony, evidence that the judge is keeping control. If they've got questions about things, they send a note to the judge, and then the judge can bring the whole jury back. They want specific evidence, they request it, they get it. If they want readbacks, they have to come to the judge. It's all to keep the judge in the driver's seat.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. Alyssa Farah-Griffin is with us as well. As you know, Alyssa, former President Trump has to remain inside the courthouse while the jury deliberates. How do you think all of this is weighing on him?
Listen, I think Trump world is really bracing for the impact of a conviction. There's clearly already a bit of a strategy underway. We saw it today that some of Trump's closest allies, members on Capitol Hill like Elise Stefanik, are actually calling for essentially an investigation into how Judge Merchan got into this case. You've seen others messaging and echoing that this is a witch hunt and calling into question the entire process itself. So what he's doing is laying the groundwork because this is out of his control. He does not know where the jury is going to come down. There's a very real chance he could be convicted. So he needs his outside allies out there convincing the public that there was something untoward here or that he wasn't treated properly. I suspect that regardless of the outcome, you're going to hear a lot of anger from Donald Trump. We've seen that when he's gone out and spoken in these little press conferences. Even if it were to be a hung jury or an acquittal, which seems unlikely, I think he's still going to rail against the judge and the process and try to use that to rally his base. I actually would disagree. I think that if they were to come to a decision quickly, especially if it were a conviction, it would play into the notion that this is partisan and they were always against him. I think it actually, the longer they take, it shows they are really weighing the facts of this case. They're being meticulous. And I think it was very noteworthy, by the way, that the judge gave this instruction about you cannot base your decision purely on Michael Cohen's testimony. It has to be corroborated. That's right. That's correct. That's the way that the process should work. And I think based on what we're hearing from the jury, the more information they want back, they're doing exactly that. So I'd say actually quite the opposite of what Trump World's suggesting there.
Bottom line, we have no idea what's going on inside that jury room, but we should find out fairly soon. To all of you, thank you very much for joining us. Just ahead, we're going to get more reaction to the first day of deliberations in the Trump trial from an attorney for the prosecution's star witness, Mike.
So, folks,